Good afternoon and welcome to another episode of MIQTV. It's Wednesday and it's 4 p.m. and it's time to meet this week's guest. I'm delighted this week to be joined by an old civilian by the name of Dan Ladley, who left Queggs. Now, he left Queggs in 2001. And he went off to study computer science at the University of... In fact, here he is. Wow, that was really efficient. Hello, Dan.
Hi, Mark.
Hi, I'm just giving you a bit of an introduction. So he went off to study computer science at the University of Leeds when he left Queggs in 2001. Having studied A-levels, he got 5, in fact, all at grade A. Maths, further maths, physics, art and general studies, I think I'm right in saying. And I think I'll let you take up the story from there. So tell us about what you've been up to since you left Queggs to go and do computer science at the University of Leeds in the autumn of 2001, some 21 years ago.
Yeah, it's amazing it's that long ago. I went to Leeds. I did a BSc in computer science. I think it's fair to say I was, well, as you might guess from my A-levels, I was on the more mathematical end of that. I like computers, but I liked algorithms, I like programming. I was very, very geeky at the time.
Nothing wrong with that.
I really got into that. But during between my second and third years at university, I got involved with a research project run by the Nuffield Foundation. I built computer models of how termites build nests. So you can still find that somewhere on the internet, but it's basically a bit like 3D models of arches and tunnels and things like that. And that really got me interested in research. So after I finished my undergrad degree, I started a PhD in what I thought was going to be computational biology, but then things took a bit of a turn. My supervisor at the time left the university and I got interested in financial markets and how to model those. But strangely, there's a lot of similarities between insects and financial markets.
Isn't that interesting? Because I would definitely not have thought of that. But in terms of the mathematical models required, there is quite a lot of crossover, is there?
Yes, yeah. So historically, both of them have been sort of modelled with very classical partial differential equations, that sort of approach. More recently, they've all been modelled using sort of individual simulations. So you simulate the behaviour and the decision making of everyone in the stock market or every termite in a nest.
which can have some variation between individuals, which is more like real life. And is that's presumably something that's developed and become more sophisticated as computers have become more sophisticated, and your career has probably sat across, well, maybe the most significant period of development in terms of computing power, but certainly one of them. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I think so. So there were things that I started doing at the start of my career that we literally couldn't do because computers weren't fast enough. So I remember starting one project with a colleague where we had an idea for a model, and we just wouldn't run. It would, but it would take 6 months to give us one number. And
wow,
when we realised that there was a bug in the code, that was another 6 months. Yeah, it was it was not good. But 10 years later, and with Moore's law, so this idea that computing power doubles every about 18 months, suddenly, that's actually only a week or two. And whilst it's not quick, is manageable, certainly in research terms. So, yeah, computing power has been my friend over.
You can get stuff done finally. You've got all the ideas, but not the machinery. But now the machinery will help you develop your ideas much better. That's fascinating, because, as I say, that last 21 years, there's probably never been a period like it before now where we've seen that amount of change. So you come out of we finished your PhD at the University of Leeds. What happened next?
So I finished my PhD. I was looking around for jobs. The academic job market's a bit funny in that it's basically, if you want to be an academic, you have to some extent to disregard geography. There's only a certain number of employers in Yorkshire. If you're really into research, there's York, Leeds, Sheffield universities, Bradford as well, to be fair. And then there's a few of the, depending on your area of expertise, some of the post-92s are good, but it depends on what you're doing.
Depends on what you're doing. They don't all have departments and everything, do they?
No.
And is that, at what point did you decide that's what you wanted to do? How far back did you know you wanted to continue in research and academic life?
I think probably at the start of my PhD.
Right.
So I think a PhD is a really fun qualification. You get 3 or 4 years to do a lot of research, so it can be really enjoyable, but it can be quite hard work. Because, not only is it can be intellectually difficult. You go from at school, at undergraduate, at university, time is measured in sort of a few weeks. You hand in the next bit of coursework, next homework, the next exam, and you're assessed continuously. With a PhD, you start and you have one assessment 3 or 4 years in the future.
Yeah.
And so it's quite hard to make that transition. But I went into the PhD thinking I wanted to be an academic, and came out of it still thinking I wanted to be an academic, which isn't that common, as it turns out.
Puts people off sometimes, I guess.
Well, that's it.
Yeah.
The stats on the number of people who start a PhD versus become an academic they're not good. In a way.
Okay, that's really interesting.
Well over 90% of people who get PhDs don't become academics, and when it's it's a qualification that's it does help you with other careers, but the main career is academia. From that, and that part of it is some people are put off by it. The other part is that depending on what field you're in, getting permanent work as an academic afterwards can be tough, and that's particularly the physical and the sort of the life sciences, medicine, biology. Sorry, I'm not painting a very positive picture, but
maybe we're learning why 90% of people don't go into it. It's not. I mean, you did say you picked up there. It's not something where you've got loads and loads of employees. We're talking about research universities, which are not all universities in all disciplines have that, as you said. So immediately you're in a fairly rarefied atmosphere, and then there's got to be a job going, which of course there may well not be if someone's already got it and they're quite happy in their job. So that's another restriction. So you said geography, you had to disregard geography. So what happened?
So I think I did pretty well in the job market. So I put in about 60 applications, and I got 3 job offers in the end, and that's fairly good. So the person who I started at the same time as me at Leicester, I know he put in over 100 and had 1.
Wow,
and that's not unusual.
You've got to be committed. As you say, it's a fairly competitive job market with not many offers. Yeah,
exactly. And I live in Leicester. I really like it as a city, but prior to getting a job there, I'd never been. I didn't have any connection there. My other 2 job offers, one was in Sydney in Australia,
right,
and the other was in Bathurst. So Bathurst is a small town about 4 hours drive from Sydney, sort of Australian quasi outback.
Right.
Nice university, but it wasn't necessarily a place I wanted to live.
So it was go down the M1 or go to the other side of the world, basically.
That's it.
So you chose to go down the M1.
Yes.
And what happened next?
So I started as a lecturer in the Department of Economics, which I found was quite funny because I'd never studied economics. So 2 weeks after starting, I was teaching intermediate macroeconomics and was about a week or 2 ahead of the students.
Wow.
So,
well, I have to confess, I have been there teaching stats actually in the past, only a little bit ahead of the students. I'm better than that nowadays, but when probably in your day, and we'll get to that later. I was teaching some things for the first time, but that's at A level, which I'd studied. This is a whole new discipline to you, and you're teaching university undergraduates. So that's a steep learning curve, I imagine.
Yeah, that was hard work. So I got through my first year. Fortunately, in the second year, different courses, different modules came up, and they were much closer to my areas of expertise. So I started teaching things on risk management, on financial derivatives, and they're more my skill set.
You felt more comfortable in that arena, yeah, I'm sure.
That's it. So that settled down quite nicely. And then I sort of got stuck in at the University of Leicester. So I started off as a lecturer, where most of my time was teaching and research. So I did lots of research on various aspects of financial markets, banks, things like that. I published some papers. So that went quite well. And I taught as well. And then over time, I got promoted. So I went from lecturer to senior lecturer after about 6 years. and
Mhm.
that's about average. I then went from senior lecturer to reader after about another 2 years, and then I became a professor 18 months after that. And each step on that journey is basically it's a promotion based on what you've achieved. So research is a big part of it. So what papers I've published, what grant money I've been able to earn, what teaching I've done, but also what leadership I've done. So I started off quite small, running a course, and then I moved on to running a set of postgraduate degrees, which I think at their peak had about 800 or 900 students between them. And then I moved on to running all of the learning and teaching in the business school, which at the time was about 3,500 students.
Wow.
And then a few years ago, I became the deputy dean of the business school. And just less than a year ago, I took over as the dean, which is academic speak for effectively, I'm the head of the department, or the head of the school.
The head of the whole school in the university. So it's this what we've been building to, because you're the first professor, we were the first academic, actually, out and out lifetime academic we've had on Mailing Quakes TV, the first professor we've had. And I think I'm right in saying, I remember hearing it's about 5 years ago now, you're one of the youngest professors at that time and still in the country. Is that right? It's not, I think when people think of professors, they don't think of necessarily relatively young men or women, I guess, a young man sat in front of us who've worked their way up to that. So can you tell us a bit about, because I am fascinated, I don't know many professors, so it's a pleasure to have you on. Can you tell us a bit more about how that comes about and what, you started to explain there, but and congratulations belatedly, by the way, obviously, but go public with it, because I've not talked to you about it since it happened. But that's fantastic. So tell us a little bit about that, because it's quite an honour, I imagine, that you must have been very pleased.
Yeah, yes, I was. I mean, I think it's almost a universal aim amongst academics that everyone wants to be a professor, because it's the pinnacle of the field. So I got there at 34. I know statistically I was amongst the youngest 1% of professors in the country at that time. A rough metric is, if you can do it before you're 40, you've done really well. Yeah. So that's generally thought to be good going. So I was very happy with that. So I'm 39 now, so I'm certainly still young. I'm not the youngest in my school anymore, but that's because I've just hired someone who's 32.
Wow.
So, and that's very good.
Yeah, I think we'll talk about hiring and firing a bit later on as well. But so that's absolutely fantastic. And then the dean of the school, you said is that another promotion? Have I got that right?
That's sort of
senior role.
So academia is a bit funny in this regard, that we've got the 3 or 4 levels, with professor being the top, and now I'm still known as a professor, but the dean role is a sort of an administrative role that I've taken on top of that. So what that means, I run the business school. There are about 250 staff in the business school, so of which the vast majority report to me indirectly or directly. So I've got...
You're their boss, effectively.
Basically, yes. The funny thing about academia is normally the way you get to being a professor is mainly through research, a bit of leadership. It's very unusual for you to actually have managed anyone before. So,
same in teaching, actually. You're a really good teacher, so then they make you a manager and you do less teaching.
Well, that's it.
Has that been your experience as well?
Exactly, yeah. So in academia, it's people who are really good researchers, and then you make them manage people, which is a completely different skill set. So I had a really steep learning curve there.
Again,
I was fortunate. I spent 3 years as the deputy to a dean, so I was able to learn sort of on the job there, and I gradually took over more management responsibility in that role. But it was steep. You go from being focused on teaching and then research to really having to care about HR and employment laws and things like that you've not been trained on, but you really need to know.
Fantastic. And again, more another theme that's coming through: constantly learning, constantly developing new skills, constantly, and that is a theme that's come up with lots of all civilians that I've talked to in these kind of interviews, these kind of talks, because you think, oh, I've left school, I've learned everything. And of course, that's not the case. That's not what happens. This life and your career will constantly be challenging you to develop new skills. And you're another brilliant example of that. Tell us a bit about what's going on for you at the moment as the dean of the business school at Leicester University. What are the main issues you're grappling with?
So there's lots of interesting things going on. One of the most interesting at the moment is at school we're doing very well at the moment. Actually, as a whole university, but particularly as a school, we've had a big increase in the interest in our courses, which meant we've taken a bigger undergraduate cohort this year. We've taken a bigger postgraduate cohort, and so I'm having to hire more staff. So in the last year, I've hired 55 permanent academics, which is is a huge number. Of those, about 15 are professors. Certainly at some points, multiple points this year, we've been trying to hire more professors than all of the other business schools in the country put together. So
real growth period for you under your leadership as well. So again, more congratulations. That's absolutely brilliant. You're obviously on top of it and doing a superb job there. And if for thinking about students or people watching, are there particular disciplines that are doing better than others, or are there things that the business school and the economics school obviously is thriving? Would that be true in all sectors, or are there some that are growing faster than others? I suppose that's what I'm trying to say.
That's really interesting. So for our undergraduates, we're finding that all of our major courses are doing well. So there's not, so we're seeing growth in economics, in accounting and finance, in business and management, marketing, HRM. So they're all doing really well at the moment, which is surprising that there isn't that differentiation. Across universities the university more broadly, that's not the case. Some subjects are doing well at the moment. I think for at least the last decade, STEM subjects have had a relatively good time. And then subjects such as English have struggled. You can see this in the data for how many students are taking English degrees, but also how many students are taking A-level English as well. So it's
and we've seen that, and that's a shame. And I think that my advice is always play to your strengths, do the things that you think you're going to do best in, and take the opportunities there. But it's interesting to see what the sort of mood in the world at large is. If we think back to your time at school, because that's something that you came from. Made in Quegs is the sort of theme of what we're doing. Are there any strong memories that you've got, or any particular experiences you look back to and think, oh, that was an important time, or that was something that I learned from that you've kind of taken forward? Are there anything that springs to mind if you think back to your time in school?
So I think all of my my strongest memories from school are particularly around the sixth form, but particularly around the maths and the further maths cohort that I was in. So it's 20 years since I did it now, but certainly for those 2 years of A-level, I spent half of my time with the same group of, I think it was about 7 or 8 of us, and that was really positive. I think both material interest in me, but also having that group of people that you could discuss things with, bounce ideas off, and that was really, I think, really positive and really helpful. And that certainly helped me develop my maths, but I think it developed my problem solving skills more, and those are ones that I've used again and again throughout my career.
As you've had to reinvent yourself in different sort of spheres, that you've fallen back on those base skills. That's really interesting. And are you in touch with anyone from that group, or any people from school, or have you? Because sometimes people are, sometimes people aren't.
No, embarrassing. I'm very bad at keeping in touch with people. So sadly, no. So I do know that people. Well, one member of staff in the school was in my year.
He was. We'll name drop Mr. Lambert, the head of RS. He was your year at school. He may not thank us for saying that. He did recently celebrate a big birthday, which you're obviously headed towards from what you said earlier. So that's good, and good luck for that. And sort of in more general terms, what have you led on to? Have you got children? Have you settled down? Tell us a bit about that, because obviously that's interesting. Well, how does that fit around the academic? How does that fit around academic life, as it were?
So yes, I've lived in Leicester now for 14 years. So
Hmm.
I'm married. I've got two children who are 8 and 4, and
Hmm.
my 4-year-old's just started school 6 weeks ago,
Brilliant.
and that's entertaining and stressful.
Yeah.
My 8-year-old's more settled now. She's been in school for 4 or 5 years, so that's really good. When I'm not, there is a tension between the type of work I do and home life,
Yeah.
in the sense that
I
the
wonder about that.
academics have a reputation for spending ridiculous amounts of time working. An element of it is a vocation. You can't do research unless you really love what you're doing.
Mm.
My job now, I do a little bit of research, but my job is ultimately leadership. And whereas I might used to maybe spend 20, 30 hours a week researching, plus then other things on top, I now typically spend 35, 40 hours a week in meetings, and that's, puts different demands.
Tiring.
It's tiring. Yes, I think it's fundamentally, it's tiring, and particularly in the type of role I'm in, you've always got to be focused in the meeting.
Yeah.
There's no ability to doze off, or not doze off, but lose
People
focus.
are looking for you for a decision or
Yeah.
some sparkling input to a particular problem, or I can relate to that, and I can sympathise and support you in that. And what's next? I mean, you may not know. Obviously, yeah. We're not all able to plan. Sorry.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Got a bit of interruption there. Sorry, got a bit of
I can hear you. Yeah.
It all froze a minute. Sorry. What's the sort of next steps? How do you see things developing potentially? Will you stay the dean forever, or is that a temporary thing?
No. So I've got a 5-year contract, or just less than 5 years. So I've got another 4 years as dean. After that, I don't know. Certainly currently I'm enjoying it a lot. So I might be seeing if there's possibilities to continue doing it. I don't know. So far in my career, I've tried not to, when I've taken a step into a role, I've tried not to say, actually, this is a step to the next role. I've done roles that, taking jobs that I want to do, that I think I'll enjoy and I think I'm good at, rather than taking roles that I think will get me to the step afterwards.
I think that's a really important point, actually, isn't it? Is play what's ahead of you. This feels right for me now, because I think if you do too much of the former, where I'm only going to do this because I want to get to that, and there may be times and places for that in a career, but actually you have to do it, and you have to do it to the best of your ability, as you clearly have. So I think that's really good advice. Taking things that feel right, that you want to do, however long it's for. And clearly you've had steep learning curves more than once, and you've stepped through that and gone to the next level. And I think that's a really, really important thing. And if I'm sitting here as a young person thinking, oh well, I quite fancy doing that. Have you got any advice for aspiring academics? What sort of things that perhaps, if you could go back and give young Dan Ladley some advice or some things to watch out for, what might you say to him?
So what I would say is, if you want to be an academic, it's a really rewarding career. You get an incredible amount of freedom. You get to do something that you really enjoy, and that you get to work with really interesting people. The catch is you have to really enjoy it. It's if you're not really into the sort of the academic study of something, it won't be for you. You spend a lot of time reading, looking at, examining particular, whatever it is that's your area of interest. And if you're not really into it, it's going to be horrific.
It's going to be hard work. So it's not really a means to an end. It's a means in itself. Much more.
Exactly.
You have to want to do that, and that's really interesting, because I think sometimes people might want to do a PhD, but it's having that desire, that passion, that particular interest, which you obviously had. But the thing to note, again, you didn't do computing at school. It was something that came later, and now look where it's led. So I think it's always and I've seen this with former guests as well, that your career doesn't always go where, looking back 20 years ago, you thought it might. And I think being open to that is obviously really important, because if we're told school leaver Dan Ladley, you'll be a professor one day as dean of the School of Leicester, School of Business at Leicester. What might you have said? You might have thought, wow, really? Is that I'm off to do computing? And as teachers, we might have thought that, really, I'm off to do computing at Leeds. How's that going to happen? There are many stories and yours is a brilliant one from that point of view. Be open to the different experiences and then the next stages it's on. Do you ever get back to Wakefield? Because we'd love to have you come into school if you ever want to visit. I know you're busy and you're probably swamped with things, but do you ever get back up? Is your family here?
Yeah, fairly often. So my parents are still in a village close to Wakefield, so I'm up fairly regularly. No, if there's anything I can do for you, let me know. I'm very happy to help.
I wasn't really fishing, but thank you. Whereas, I mean, we love having Ulstervillians back in school. But yeah, if there's if you've got some time, I'm sure there are current students. I mean, economics and business courses at school, we do both A levels, and they're always really popular. And I mean, I've done a UCAS today with a current student who's applying for economics with Spanish actually. But economics and business courses are popular destinations for our students at university. So thank you for the offer, because I'm sure that current students may well benefit from a chat or some input from an expert such as yourself. It's lovely to have contact with someone and to see that your career has followed such a successful pathway. As I say, you're always welcome back in school. I can't believe we've been talking for nearly half an hour already. The time's absolutely flown. Yeah. Any final words for thinking about for anybody watching that? As I say, any final advice, that things you definitely know now that you didn't know then, that you'd like to share with the audience before we wind up?
So I think something I've learned from academia is absolutely full of imposter syndrome. We all work with, I work with 180 academics, all of who are experts in their field. I think the important thing to remember is, what you're good at, what you know that other people can't do, rather than trying to judge yourself or assess yourself against other people's areas of expertise. Plus, that way lies madness. You just don't, believe in what you know and what you can do.
Yeah, work hard and back yourself, and it will all work out. Dan, thank you ever so much for joining us. I know you're incredibly busy, and I'm really, really grateful for you giving up the time to talk to us and share your wisdom and your success in your fabulous career, and long may it continue. So you're a young man with lots of things yet to discover and yet to achieve, and we'll follow your progress in your career very closely. But thank you very much for joining us today. It's been absolutely brilliant to talk to you.
No problem. Thanks. Good to speak to you. Thanks.
Bye. Take care. Bye-bye.